Here we are again in the beloved work car. I've got the heads that were incorrect uninstalled from my engine, and I've got the correct heads installed. And so I can pick that up and continue to assemble that this upcoming weekend, hopefully. In the meantime, we've got 8 sticks of SDR35 4-inch drain tile on the roof, and a ratchet strap that may be flapping in the wind. But these were $32 and some change per stick at Lowe's. They were $38 and some change per stick at the plumbing supplier. And while I had him on the phone standing in Lowe's, I asked him, well, what's the rest of like fittings and stuff, all of them. Everything was about 20 to 25% more expensive than the price at Lowe's. Lowe's has plenty of pipe, but they had 1 or 0 of all the fittings that we need. So we are going to pay more exorbitant prices for the fittings on this part. But this is how the cookie crumbles when you get there. You can look all around for the best pricing when you estimate, and you can put that in the estimate if you're foolish without adjusting somewhere else. But planning on everything being the best price you ever saw it for and taking the amount of time you expect or less adds up. And that's what's been kind of going on in this project. And so I've been pointing to it here and there. I'm going to point to it a little bit more going forward. That there's just things that you have to deal with that come up in the moment, because if you don't, or you choose to try and do something else or put it off or avoid it, you cost yourself more in the long run. And so we'll snag our 8 sticks for the better pricing at Lowe's because they've got them. We'll get everything we need in one fell swoop at the other store because I've got a list and they've got it all. I will go back to the store a couple of times over the course of this task because that's the nature of plumbing and changing your mind and working around problems. But we get all done doing it that way, that'll be the best case scenario for getting this done. And getting this done is part of keeping problems like this house had before from happening again, and benefiting from all the construction techniques that we know about today, as opposed to over almost 100 years ago when the house was constructed. And so this is something that I want to get done that immediately improves the situation that contributed to the failures that led to this project. And then we can finish backfilling, and then it'll feel a lot better on site when you can walk up to the house kind of all the way around. So let's get over there and lay this thing out. All right, we've made it on site. We've got a bunch of fittings. There's nowhere near this quantity sitting at Lowe's, and so on the way over to the site from there, we swung through the other place that we knew we could check on or utilize in the event that we didn't want to buy everything over to Lowe's. And we got the rest of what we need except the manufacturer that they carry for the J-hook that will be what we attach to the foundation to then snap these legs down into and position so that we know we're kind of going downhill and that the whole thing is kind of going in the direction that we want, rather than trying to be in space and hold this up somehow or anything else like that, because in the end this is going to be covered with dirt. The J-hooks that they offered at the closer supplier would work fine to hold this and be attached to a joist inside with an interior screw, but they aren't heavy enough with large enough holes and made of the right plastic to where I can use a concrete screw through them, and so we will have to get them somewhere else. And so we're going to unload all of this so we're not driving all over any further than necessary with these pieces on the car, but we're going to get a little farther and maybe suss out a couple more things that we need to get or whatever while we're here looking at things and move the material out to the area of the site. But we're going to turn right around, get back in the car, and go out and get those hooks practically immediately, because we need to start by installing them first after setting up the laser and everything else here. It kind of starts by putting all those up, and they're all based. We're going to start technically by putting the pipeline in from here through there, which is supposed to be a little higher, and the lower and lower into the lowest point over here. So from here on up to there, up and up on the other side of the garage, up from here underground, which we'll have to excavate, and up to this location facing up right here, so that someday we can point that downspout into that. And we've discussed this in the previous video, but I'll just kick things off here because this is what we're doing now. Obviously up and up and up. Problem is, if we're going up at a very tiny amount, by the time we get here, can we go across going upwards under this window hole, or will we be forced to go across in front of it so that we don't create a low area, a hump that we can't get up and over with the flow that's coming from here. Because if we can't, we can either dig even deeper and route it even further below the footing here, which I hesitate to do. And this will need to be retrenched, but I've got the machine here. We're going to try to avoid that. However, to know that, we've got to get so far, and to get that far, we've got to have the right pieces, and I hedged a bet that it would be more important to get those pieces. I'm not going back to Lowe's. I'm going to have to go somewhere else, a third place, to get those hooks. But why are we bothering on the couple days and, you know, say $2,500 to $2,800 between the time and materials anticipated right now? I could probably update you here when we get all done with the exact dollars and cents to do that, rather than just doing what was done here before, which was to kick over with an elbow and ostensibly put a long stick of pipe out onto the ground for the rainwater to go in. Because overall here, obviously, the state of affairs in the gutters and downspouts here has been, you know, left without any maintenance or repair or upkeep or attention for quite a really long time. And so that doesn't just mean, I mean, it's more difficult up there higher up, but the same goes for if you're someone who's not going to do that, then you're not going to get to the bottom part, which is just as important here. See, I'm sure everybody has seen this in the background, but all of those plants have root systems, and all those root systems are in the rotted down soil that's come from smaller, less developed plants in the past. And so it's taken years for there to be enough soil to support the root systems on plants this large, which has come as a product of things growing up in there and dying, and the root systems and stuff rotting down and becoming more soil. And so everything is one long solid root ball of its own soil that it's made by living its entire life cycle in that gutter. And in the case of this here, it's always been a problem. It poured water all over here, but this is obviously not working. Even though it's sort of intact, that just explodes water out of there, and it pours it all over a window hole that comes into your house. And so theoretically, we may discover someday that this has all got collateral rot here because of all that water pouring directly onto a place when usually it's under the overhang of a roof. It should be all dry to this point. And that brings me to my final point here, because I don't think people understand, because they think, well, it rains outside and water gets on the ground immediately when it passes, if it's raindrops that fall just outside the footprint of the house, well, they soak into the ground and it makes the ground wet. So all this talk about how, you know, the rain going through the gutter system and getting on the foundation, making it that much more wet, it's like it doesn't compute. But I need you to understand something. Imagine we get an inch of rainfall, okay? That is to say that a 1 inch by 1 inch square gets 1 inch deep of water anywhere in the region, okay? And so imagine a 1 inch mat of clay, 1 inch thick, rolled out thin blanket of clay. And if you were to drop it straight down, 1 inch thick would land on the house, and you could cut all the way around the roof itself, and the negative would fall over the house to, about a foot out or whatever like that, and the rest of that 1 inch mat would fall out here, okay? And so that's the volume of water that's been contributed to the ground out here all over the place. But then you got to take that mat that lays on the whole roof of the house and roll it all up into a ball, and then roll that ball into a snake, and then route that clay snake all the way around the footprint of the house, because all of this surface area's volume of water in a 1 inch rainfall is supposed to go into the gutter. Whether it goes into the gutter or comes sheeting off the roof, it's consolidated and it's focused. Its volume is focused right along outside the house by about a foot. And if you have no overhang, like many homes on the gable ends, this is your eave side, but on the gable, a lot of places, different styles, don't have that much of an overhang. It's flush, at least on the gable end. And so that concentration of water is a little bit less surface area overall than somebody with the same house and an overhang, but it's just moved, the concentration of it is that much nearer to the foundation. Now, if you have those legs on your downspouts and you're religious about them being 5 to 10 feet long, and all of that water is delivered to this region out here, well, it's pulled down and over by gravity. It spreads out and contributes to the overall groundwater level out here easier than when you're that close to the house. It can come down and over and right into the porous foundation if you haven't got a product like the current modern day waterproofing on there, which is why we use that stuff. But it's to be used in conjunction with an appropriately plumbed downspout system. So why are we putting it underground here? Because it will be sort of on autopilot. It will be a glued plastic loop with a clean out port everywhere it comes out of the ground, where you can take out and put a snake through it to clear it out. And we'll put a venturi or a atrium, which is a three-dimensional cap that's perforated on the end of it, so that you can keep Mr. Toad, Mr. Frog, Mr. Chippy Monkey from moving on in there. And it'll come out and be an apparent place where you can see, if you come out with your raincoat and your galoshes on, your boots, and you're walking around and you're seeing that you're not having water come off. And this is things that you should do at home. See that everything's working as it should, and rather than just pouring out here on the ground or being a 3-foot piece here that gets kicked or blown away or stomped on flat or what have you, it's all underground and it's serviceable and contained and complete. And we will, I strongly suggest that they at least clean their gutters and put things back together like this. But I'll be here in the first sort of rains in the coming year, just to see when we're touching things up, when we're talking about coming back for a few days to add some material to bring the grade up now that it's settled, and different things like that. And they're friends of mine, so I'll be here in the rainstorms on purpose, just to see that this is all working initially the way that it should. And then you ought to get 10 years out of it without ever having to even check. You should always check, but you ought to get plenty of time. The last thing is keeping these branches and trees back and away. This is a sumac. It's a garbage tree. It's been barked up, and it should be cut down and away. There are other trees and stuff here that we've removed now that were spilling and dumping leaves straight down into the gutters, and it creates a problem like this here. Not only is this a widowmaker now, but the few leaves that it has are trying to fall right into that gutter. You would take that branch off. And it's nice to live in a little woodland grove in the shade, but you have to balance that with what's practical. If you're going to go up there every year or two and actively clean that gutter out, or pay somebody to do so, well, then you can have it just the way you like. But if it's going to skip your mind and you're not going to get to it, you can't have the tree branch laying on the shingles. People worry about squirrels and stuff because they can see those, but all the bugs, the ant colonies, and the things that can go right up here and right here and right along and right at any of these openings in and around your home and right along this wall to the kitchen, or right along anywhere up there and down into the kitchen. And if you get ants in your house, this is something that you can get rid of immediately. And it's also moving in the wind, scuffing all the stones and stuff off there, and ultimately holding in the lee from the sun and the rain and everything else, holding detritus and pine needles and crap and leaves in and plugging. I mean, I'm sure that's just positively stuffed full. And thereby, we end up down the road needing a severe and extreme reset to the entirety of the place. And so this is why, at this point in the project, when we get down to handling stormwater on this property, I'm going to be really detail-oriented about it, because it's how we got here to begin with, and it's going to be well worth spending the time, because if anybody wanted to do it in the future, well, you can start bringing the excavator in, making a mess of the yard, trenching all around, driving on everything, backfilling it, waiting for that to settle, etc., which you'd never choose to do down the road. And it should only be chosen, as a home project if you got a lot of other things sorted out, or if it's a real dire situation for you. But so anyway, I just wanted to preface this before we get going here. This thing here isn't that much expense in material and time when you consider the value that it adds here in this specific case. And so I hope that nobody feels that we're just puttering around. So check this out. All right, I got this stuff dumped out, and I thought I might use the transit, but I've been relying on actually just measuring down from the top edge of the foundation to get my grading done, because that's at this point level enough for this project, and rather than trying to see the laser line or whatever, I can just pull an actual measurement down. So that's been good. What I essentially started with was this leg here, because we know we want to be down and below if we're using a window well, which of course if we don't end up doing, it's no problem. But if we are going to use a window well and we want to have stone in the bottom of it and we don't want to see this at all, I stayed down even from the gasketed edge of the waterproofing by a couple of inches. And so that started my maximum distance from this level up here. And so I set this stick in where over his 10-foot length, he's 2.5 inches higher on this side than that side. So we got our inch or a 1/4 inch per foot fall. And then I get the same measurement around any corner. So around an inside corner, it's the same distance, or around an outside corner, it'll be the same distance. And I'm about a foot off of the end of every leg of this that I need to do as a rule. And thereby I can get all these pieces sort of in place. Now these are whole pieces, so I'm going to start and put an elbow in there so I know that their overall length is finite, and then I could cut it to get around the corner, to install an elbow that gets us around the corner and lines us up with this direction here. The other nice thing about using these hooks is that my distance from the center line of the pipe in a hook to the face of the foundation will be the same in every place where we're locked into a hook, and the hook will hold it up where I want it to be. Now, you can't just throw dirt on this when we're all done. It'll just rip that off the hooks. You can't just idiotically pour dirt here. We're going to have to fill carefully from below and tease it over under to a certain extent, and then we can hand, serve it up onto there, and ideally we get a bit of rain before we finish up and stuff, and so that if we do end up breaking the hook in the future, we don't go very far, and ultimately we don't disturb this whole thing. I'll put a couple of screws in. I've only got the one now. Doing two is doubling on the hardware cost and all of this, and really it's holding it up fine, and if we were to do anything, we're not going to pull the screw out of the concrete. We're going to rip and break the hook itself. So I'll probably stick to just one screw, and again, it just allows me to make commitments and hold things rather than having to sculpt the land perfectly first and then build this on top of that, which is an alternative method that I just don't care for. We're also going to have to dog leg here because of how thick the siding is. If we're coming up the face, well, to a certain extent, I guess we're not completely tight to the wall. But I don't think when we get up here that we're going to clear completely. We may have to dogleg out and back away from the wall, which would mean that once we're going in a vertical, either at the bottom of that or probably where it's out of sight, probably not at the top, we'll use a 22.5 and then another 22.5 to just put a jog in all the way around where we need to. Where we don't, we won't do that. You could alternatively, you could use longer screws and do more messing around and put a block of treated lumber or even just white lumber behind that hook before you put it on the wall, which would hold the center line of all these out, and then you could go up with a straight shot. But again, it's more hands than I have to do, and it's longer screws, which are more expensive. And so again, can't make or destroy energy here. It's 6 1/2 dozen. But I've only got to get around the corner there, around to here. And oh, and by the way, with my mathematical investigations based on how deeply this had to be set, when we get over here, I shouldn't have to do any hand digging or deepening of this, and if so, I can get right back over here with the machine, and it won't be in there that I need to be. It'll be this last little piece here that I can get. So with all of that said, I'll snap you guys in to watch how much I can do before I need to go back to the store, which ought to be some. I ought to be able to be here for a minute or two anyway. Okay, so that was an hour and a half or something worth of piddling here. We've quickly got the main line doing what we want to see it doing all the way basically until I can see that this is sitting a bit higher than that, and if anything from here we got to go downhill, and if anything the trench kind of goes uphill, which you can just take my word for. So we got to come back basically where I'm standing with the machine and I'm going to dig another probably foot down to 6 inches over the course of this, to the degree that I can be that precise. And then it's like, I also want to locate and cut in the connections, which are going to be, to the downspout, which are going to come down and go in at a 45-degree angle, just as you would any other plumbing drain. So for each one of these verts, we're going to be, where's a good one as an example? The one that would come through between these windows, right? So instead of coming down there only to fall into the egress window, basement, window well, I'm going to keep this angle going. I'm going to come right through here to there, turn and come straight down and go right in here. And that's going to be the start of everything. We don't have anything else to catch on the other side of the house at all. However, the anatomy is going to be like this. This is our horizontal leg that's in right now, and we're going to fall down and through a 45 and into a leg like that, all in the direction of flow, and we're going to do that everywhere here. And so we got to start by putting this inlet in line with where we're going to come down the house, and then moving over and down to the point where we know where to cut this much out of our line so we can reassemble it and get this fitting in. And by the time we assemble this tightly again facing upward, we'll be where we want to be in terms of location. Less important here where we're going to get there with the downspout. In the case of this one on the outside corner, we are free to kind of rebuild that a little bit. I'd like to see it so hard because you got to go by one window or the other there flat, and so there really isn't a good way to plan on doing that. I may end up right underneath one side or the other of the outside corner. But again, it stands out quite a bit from the concrete foundation, and so once we get that fitting in, the next thing we've got to do is kick out and then straighten out again, just to get out to a point where we're standing sort of plumb underneath the end of that downspout loop, which adds, that's the most complicated thing here, is because the downspout is going to be bonded to stuck to the house's siding. And so really what I like to see is this vertical tight to the foundation all the way up to a adapter, and then this downspout or wherever we put it roll back within downspout and go into that pipe that's tight to the foundation. That way, if you ever wanted to reside and pull some of the old siding off and stuff like that, you could do, and then you reside it and it's shallower, the siding, and your downspout locations can be new, and your gutters and all that can be done new, and wherever you go with them will make sense to go to this drain system that's underground, and it won't be standing out away from the house, so that in the future, after you do all of that, you've also got to jump out and away from the house weirdly to go down into it. I think the best practice here is going to be play everything tightly to the foundation and use the downspout aluminum tube to do the dog leg or the offset to get us back to the face of the foundation. And though it might be uglier now, it's the right way to do this so that the stuff that's underground never has to be disturbed, and it'll work until somebody wants to change things to look nicer, and then it'll still work. Won't that be nice? So I guess I'll get set up and redig this trench. Oh, and then out front, and so this is going to work like this too. We're going to kick over here because I dug this trench aligned to sort of the center line of this gap next to the foundation wall, which I don't know why. If I'd put it over there, we could have come straight through, but it's not going to hurt anything for this stuff to convene on an angle and flow, like that anyway. I had to use this Y the other way around, and this leg would have just stayed straight. It's not going to hurt to jog like that. And then out front, we've got a trench in front of the garage door. This is where we want to be here. We've got to go across under there,
over and up, and that's the other end of this whole thing over there. So got some digging to do first, I guess. All right, we got that root out of there, but the problem is the side of the bank sloughed off under my weight trying to get back out, and I slid over to where my hydraulic fluid level is on the wrong side from the pickup, and I haven't got a lot of hydraulic power, if any at all. So I put this outrigger down on the far side, and this is where we'll stay now until I figure out a way to pull that machine out, either A, without being under its own power, using something else, which is really unhandy, or B, getting it back under its own power somehow, because I can't even like reach over with this backhoe and pick up using the ground to shove my front end around up onto here. So just super cool. Anyway, it can stay there. I'm content with the depth here, and we got the root dug out and thrown out to the side. I will probably lay that stick in here today. Sorry, I'm never looking at the screen. So I'll lay the stick in here today, and then two pieces actually, end to end. And then if I'm content with that, I'll probably start by backfilling this. This will come later, but being able to walk back around through here and committing to that line and stuff being glued and held underneath the ground will be nice, because this is unhandy right here. Although I did throw this down so you could walk into the garage, and we got the garage drying out to some degree. It's going to be nice. See that? Not even leaving a print. That's what we're looking for. Extremely tightly packed up solid. So the longer it stands like that, the better. And when we pour concrete on it, we can be sure that it won't settle over time and cause the front to bust or the doorway opening over there to break, because it'll be coming right out through those. Oh, and I got some schedule. I think this is 35 again. It might be 20. Anyway, it's white, and this will be what I do the vertical legs with, because it's extremely thin, but it dresses up nicely with the white downspout and everything else. You don't want I don't care for the SRD 35 or SDR 35 teal, and I don't care for black corrugation. Just doesn't look as nice as a nice crisp vertical in white, ready for these to plug into. So that's what we'll do with that. But for today, I'm going to clean up the toolage, and that's day one on this. Hopefully button it up tomorrow, get it all glued, add the verts, commit to locations on those, backfill, and and then Wednesday we'll be on to something else, whatever that may be. But this here shouldn't have taken so long, or shouldn't take very long, and it hasn't so far, which I'm loving. Oh, we got to go across in front of the garage door too, so there's some, I got to get that machine freed up. So if anything, that'll be where the time is spent. But you don't want to watch me hand dig this, or it'd be orders of magnitude more time spent. So we'll put the time into rescuing the machine because we'll be needing it. It can't live there forever, right? And then back to work here. Well, it feels like it might rain, and Doppler says it's going to come real close to here. But we ought to be able to get something done. Oh yeah, now I remember. LOL JK. I knew that this was going to start here today, because it's not going to get any better if we get a bunch of rain here, and the digging I've got to do isn't going to be any handier. So, like, all things considered, I think the biggest problem I've got is I haven't got hydraulic power, and like I say, I suspect that's because we're nowhere near level. And then it's like old school ROPS, or rollover protection system, where you just don't have any. It's like traction control. It just takes power away. I guess if you went and leaned the other way, I don't think you'd have the same problem. So it keeps you from getting yourself any worse before you stop to think about it. Okay, I'd like to give myself hydraulic power back so that I could use my hydraulic power to rescue myself. And so I think my only option to pulling us level is to pull. That's the thing, is I really don't. I gotta lift the low side, or try to pull with a come along to a tree over there, which my attachment, I can make my attachment strong. I've got everything here. We'll just have to set it up. I'll give it one. The problem is it's going to take me 10 minutes to set that whole thing up and get a sling around the tree and a chain around that loop, and to get out into the, oh, and I don't have, yeah, I've got to get probably half a dozen things like chain and strap to get across here with the come along in it before I can try it and give it 2 shakes of a lamb's tail and go either A, this is going to solve our issue, or B, I could pack all that stuff back up again. But I guess if we get rain and I try it then, they'll all be mud, or more muddy than they will be now. So try it now. Let's see. Well, this is basically just stretching, like when you set up a slack line. It still won't hold my weight. I can push it to the ground, and we're just pulling it out like a rubber band, which is more and more unsafe. And it just doesn't have the cojones. I'm gonna have to go get some chain from the shop, and I'm gonna get another shackle, I think. And this was worth doing since I was here, and I guess I didn't realize there isn't a single. We used chain on site, but I must have put it back in the truck back when the truck was running. So all the chain, I like to keep things together. I know all the chain will be in the chain box at home if there isn't any chain here, which there is not. So back in a flash. Well, I thought that was worth a try before walking away, by the way. I might have done that walking up this morning. It was hot yesterday, etc. And in the past I've jumped to conclusions for one reason or another that ended up being the problem actually ended up being something, yeah, obviously like an it's out of gas thing when you go tearing something apart first. So we'll just see that yes indeed it is beached, and yes indeed the hydraulic charge light is on solid, and indeed I have got no controls or power really. It'll run just fine. I've got to tip it up, so I might actually go to the bottom far low side up and over the roof into a tree, and thereby, rather than dragging it through the mud, I'm actually pulling it up and level. But I still think it's well worth getting chain, so home again, jiggity jig. All right, I'm lucky to have two. I want to say one's 40 feet. I'll always remember that because I moved a 20-foot, no, I moved a 16-foot shed with it. And I went around it once and had what I needed to drag it. So the other one I think is something similar. If it's not 20 feet, it's 30 anyway. Just there. So now what I'm thinking is, rather than going to this tree, I'll go to this one because that's more aligned to the proper side of this, because I want to go around this thing with a loop and choke across the top, around it up to there, so that pulling to there, I'm rotating this up to level. And if I can get it to level, I'll hop in and see if I can't swing the boom around and push off the ground to step the front of it out and over here more or something. You've got high center happening here where I'm light on the wheels because I've run aground in the middle of the belly, and you know, some other, and you know, there's a variety of things happening. I have to get underneath it over here and dig. So, you know, you want to think about being on your hands and knees or looking under there with your head and digging, and the possibility of it sliding further or tipping, which I don't know if it's coming through on camera, but you know, it's got a good 20 to 30 degree angle on it. Not 30 probably, but anyway, I don't think it's going to roll right over, since this whole upper weighs practically nothing. My engine block's down in here. There's 20 gallons of hydraulic fluid sitting down here. This steel plate assembly and the outrigger is down, and the bucket's hanging down real low. My center of gravity is extremely low, but you want to think about that. So let's see what kind of a project this becomes. I did think there's one more significant project in the village that I've seen with machinery often almost every day. So I rolled by there to see if anybody was operating or had anything that was parked there that looked like you could run over here, hook up and pull me, and I'd just give somebody $100 cash. I got a $100 bill in my wallet, luckily, but I didn't see anyone. And so we're down to manpower, because setting up to bring a machine, loading it to come into town and taking it off, and that's a $1,000 project from someone officially. So we're gonna try and save ourselves that by leaning on Archimedes. So I've got the steel like Johnson bar slid in from underneath, because it is tightly packed dirt kind of underneath the middle of this thing. So I poked that thing through, and then you kind of want to connect your chain and have enough slack, and when you come back you pull your chain through and out, because trying to push chain is like trying to push rope, if you know what I mean. And going uphill with it to where you can't even hang on to it to go any further than my elbow isn't going to get it there. I got to replace that steel poker with something which is that rigid and smooth, so that it'll get through to this side without getting hung up in the mud. But that which has something that I can firmly attach the hook of the chain to and send back. Or I might wipe that off with a rag and put the hook next to it, and then go through the hook and around it a couple times with like Gorilla Tape. Maybe I'll try doing that. Because I don't really have another option, and I'm right here with this far so far. So let's see what that does. Okay, so that was a bit of farting around, and I don't want a slip hook here. Because by the time because chain has a lot of weight, which is why between that not being here when I got here and having the strap, it's another reason why I started with the strap. It's because putting chain together in such a way that you have enough to take out of it with the come along still, which I'm coming to the end of the come along, but also I can't be here and keep this whole setup up here. So rather than pulling about a pivot point here on the ground to tip, we've brought that down, and we've got a shorter lever arm from our pivot to here. It's a tiny little lever arm versus way up here is a good twice, if not 3 times as much leverage for the same amount of force being applied. So what does that mean? It means take all the tension back out of it and take this chain back down to there where we hooked onto the other chain, unhook it and turn it around so that the other hook that, there's a name for it, but I'm so hot and sweaty and wasted right now, it'll lock onto a link and it won't migrate where this is designed to slide because the hook is larger. So we got to do everything we did already, where we poke the pole underneath and pull the chain through in the other direction, right? Because I can't think, no, I could hook the 2 ends together and pull this until it pulls that other hook through to that side. It's still going in the wrong direction, right? Because then, yeah, I got to turn this chain around. Yeah. Well, I could keep going here and potentially break something. We got a 5/16 diameter, maybe 3/8 diameter pin from here to there. And we've got this doubled up and welded thing here. More likely the swedge cable loop or pin. Then you got this link, 1/4 inch link loaded, and this is a 5/16 hook, and so the geometry when this gets pulled tight may not be ideal or may not reach all their engineering specs, or what this hook will take is greater than significantly what this chain will take, whereas if you had a 5/16 chain in there it would be better, or more equal. You've got this hook choked, which is how they're designed, but then we got this pin, which is bigger again than that, and we got this here link and the pin on that. However, you go to the other side and you see that the chain loop is pushing into my hydraulic line, so I'm pretty much going to take the pressure off of that right now. And so you could put something on there to go around that and continue to build this, and then any one or multiple things could fail, and if a chain link doesn't come flying out and hit you or damage a window or whatever, maybe it's not explosively violent at all, but the machine will tip from wherever you got it to back down through space and stop, and that could cause it to continue to roll, and then I've really got myself a major issue with something that's otherwise just needs to get hauled out. And so and I wish that this was the next heavier duty come along, which Don has and I could probably borrow, and I wish, but more importantly, I wish this was all 5/16 chain, which is even heavier in space, and I don't own anywhere near this long. That's what I use to bind the machine down for travel, but those pieces are 6-8 feet long, and together they won't come nearly long enough to do this here. And all in all, it's too much risk to do what it is that I'm doing here. And I've also already started to damage that hose a little bit. So I'm going to cut it and take the pressure off here, but you know, I can't do any more of anything with this downspout loop. I'm going to have to find something else and work on this here. I'm getting a call now from the concrete guy. Maybe he wants to do concrete tomorrow. Let's see. So I just gave up and got the tow truck. The last time I broke down without hydraulic pressure, he had to come and get me and drag me to get repaired, see, because if you haven't got any hydraulic pressure, it doesn't matter how well the engine's running, you can't move the machine in a single way. So this occurred to me because it was a good solution last time. And see, that cable's bigger to start with, and he ought to have plenty of cojones. He just got to sneak his butt right back in here. We'll get him set up without running the camera on him, and then I'll come back. All right, 190 plus tax, or no, excuse me, 190 with tax, and like 190 and change, which includes tax. Yeah, did you suck it down flat? Well, so we're out and idling up. I gotta eat something, then we're gonna pick up where we left off. All right, I went and got one more stick of SDR 35 sewer drain, Sked 35, which came in white from a different manufacturer, from a different supplier. These other white sticks are for the verts that are going to show, and they are I don't exactly know where to compare here, but this is an ASTM D2729 and this is an ASTM D3034. You want to be careful, for example, specifically here where we're ostensibly going to drive and have that pressure, unlike around the corner or pretty much everywhere out back, won't have that kind of a thing. I used the heavier stuff because it's a wash on the overall cost when you think about not having to come back and have an issue. So the value there. Anyway, I think I'm going to go ahead and glue this up. I've got the hangers on now, and Ed has got these fittings all primed, the ends of our pipe all primed. And so before I cut in the connections for any verts, because of the looseness, I never want to pack everything up tightly when it's dry fit because it's a bastard to tear it apart to glue it. And the vertical locations are kind of specific, so I think we'll go ahead and glue this whole loop and over into there, and throw dirt on there to lock it down, and probably throw the dirt back in through here, to make it rough to start with. It may not make it as smooth as it was before I go back to locating and cutting in the verticals, and then when I come back to backfill everything completely, I can finish up and make those areas beautiful, which is, I think, my functional flow right now. So let's glue some stuff up. All right, I brought another stick of SDR 35 to the site this morning, and so we can get through the dirt here, and I'd like to keep 2 feet showing, essentially, if not a little more for right now. But I chose to get the blue type because then you can plainly see, and it will be clear that everything underground was done in that, or it could be implied anyway. These are the things that I look for to kind of understand before I get started somewhere where I don't know what's underground. So here, this looks to me like, SDR35 likely all around, because again, our verticals are going to be in white. And if we use the white that's a lighter schedule, that's printed as such. And if we use the white that's SDR35 for that last piece, the way in which I used it down here, there, if there's no print left on it, or you don't go so far as to look at the print on it at the outlet, then you make the assumption that the whole thing is a light schedule. Whether, this is all hypothetical, and everybody, I think their eyes gloss over when I start talking like that down the road, or how you might do this or that. I do what I can to consider what I'm doing and how it would affect somebody in the future, whether it's a homeowner or another contractor or what have you. And again, like keeping these verts tight to the foundation and doing the dog leg in the aluminum will work just fine and likely not stand out to almost anyone. However, if you take, like I was saying a little earlier in the video, all the layers of siding off the house and reside and drop your downspouts, they will have to do far less of a dog leg, or you can orient. And I won't glue on the adapter, which has an offset rectangular opening that's not on center with the circular cap for these. And so if you need that to the outside or to the in, or want to take it away and you're lucky enough to need one that puts it on center, you can have one of those. And so in the future, someone can continue to improve everything, instead of dealing with a buried line and where all the verts are 2 or 3 inches or something or more off the face of the foundation all the way around, which is just irritating, because then you have the tall grasses and weeds and things that grow all in and behind, all the way, literally all the way in behind and around in there, and you're trying to weed whip and dig around in there, and whatever you're trying to do, rather than keeping it tight and having an easier time with that. So if it multiplies out several times, it's multiplied several pains in the ass. Lights are on in the basement. Oh, Ed's been here already and unplugged my motion activated sensor and then didn't ever plug it back in. We're also going to, I took the time and effort to get these glued, which may seem counterintuitive, but then all I've got to do is look at, and that's for putting this is for putting in the verts. Several things here. Ed did a careful job with a lot of these Ys, not to get the purple slopped all around on the outside, because the cleanout Ys you'll be seeing above ground, and we don't want to see all of that. The rest of it you could be a little bit more avant-garde, but it never hurts to practice doing something like this. But in the event of, so these are standing up like this outside. I'm going to be exhausted about that. But, what we're talking about connecting up to the downspout is here, and the little plug cap and stuff takes off of there, and you can snake the drain line out. In the case of adding a vertical, we're going to come through on the horizontal like that, and we're going to use the 45 to kick us up. And so all you need to do here is get a distance from the center line of this outlet to, or its relationship with the place where you're going to cut this much out of the line to accommodate the hub ends. So all I want to do is go around and critically think about whether I'm going to continue to use that plumb location for the downspout, or if I'm putting up a new one and I can get there with aluminum, or that I have more freedom. So there might be 1 or 2 cases here where I've got to be exactly somewhere, and the rest of them will just follow where they may. But if you've got to be exactly somewhere, you could get the difference, this dimension from the center line here to this hub kind of easily by laying it down where it will sit flat. It's going to be a round number, which is something I came to realize in my early career designing high-end plumbing systems that are welded. You find out that you have to be, because in the world of plumbing, you've got to be in certain places very specifically, just as you've got to be like dimensionally correct in other construction. Here we are. So despite the fact that it is round, they make it really easy in a lot of ways. So, you can do something where we'll just glance at this. It'll be a round number is what I'm getting at. They make it real easy on you. Or in the case of this, it's very likely the face of this is the center line of that. It may not look that way on the camera. And so if we just plot, if we know where we want to be, and we plumb down to the horizontal and make a note of that, and then we measure over to, it looks like 2 inches. So from the line, going in the downstream orientation, which is the direction we want to go here. So we just can note on the horizontal where we want to be, and then at 2 and at 8 we cut, zoop, zoop. And then the last thing I'll say is I'm not going to backfill anything. I had considered throwing dirt on this and underneath the garage door, but if I'm pulling that open to get those fittings in there, I'm going to want it's going to be quite simple to do it if I can slide this thing a couple of inches and then a couple of inches back, because it has those degrees of freedom, and I can hop up and out of these hooks and stuff, so I can get, legs separated away. And so that goes back to why did I originally glue it? It's because I don't need everything coming apart or having to glue all of it all back together again. I can make commitments, so we know this is the line that we want to take. I can commit, and I can add fittings all over it and branch off of it, and then I can commit to that and continue. Oh, all the verts will be overly tall. I'll probably go just a couple inches shy of the siding on each of them, and endeavor to hold them plumb. If it means putting another hook on the wall to do that, that'll be buried underground. But in any case, then I'll backfill and maybe even let it sort of marinate for a while and settle. And then finally, I'll go around and I'll pull a dimension down from the siding on each of them that's equal. So essentially, the top level of all of the verts are as level as the edge of the siding, which is as level as the top surface of the concrete, which is essentially quite level. And we'll cut them there and throw the caps on them and then get into them, with the aluminum or whatever. But the order of operations is important on that, because if you go throwing all the things together all in the first round, you may compound errors and stuff. So that's how I chose to do this here. What else? I guess we're just going to get that all done. Then I can after I have all the verts cut in and then glued in, etc. We can begin to backfill. And I will start with this and some other in the area in front of the garage. And so we've got some control points, and then I'll start sloughing the dirt and stuff off in there and see that it builds up, and I can cover from here. As I'm filling this, I'm going to throw some bank run. I'll probably dump some out here so I can dipper it over there maybe too. But that's practically touching the ground. This is going to be practically touching the ground. And so I won't start with places that are high and above, that are up and above where we've got it filled, and I won't dump directly on there. I'm going to dump to the side and let it sift in underneath and then apply it to the top. But we're also going to add a couple of J-hooks. I bought the whole case of them, honestly, off the shelf. And so we'll subdivide something like this in maybe 3 more times or something. It ought to be something that I can walk, believe it or not, I can walk on or stand on with my weight, since I'm 180. And if we've divided that in 5 times or something, that's all the more each of them is bearing. So and I'm point loading it. But if you could imagine taking 80-pound bags of concrete, which are as if it were, to figure the amount of pressure that's going to be laying on top of this thing, we could imagine 80-pound bags of concrete being set up onto it right along, because essentially they're about as thick as the pipe is, and they'll be about as tall as where the ground will be. And overall, it is concrete, but if it's saturated gravel with water, with the water's weight in there too, it's a good indication of the kind of weight we're talking about. And so it's 80, 160, there's quite a lot more weight there than just a human being standing on it that we're going to ask it to do. But we're looking to pack up underneath it as well. And so then we aren't pushing down into space. We've sort of backed it up to everything. It's all the better we can do here. We don't want to underserve the issue and then have the weight of everything break it all down and disrupt any of the fall that we've got happening, because in every other way, it being glued and it being underground and buried and packed and outletting over here and one contiguous circuit without leaks, if it hasn't got fall or if it's got higher and low points in there because of the way that the ground settled, it's kind of a big stupid, because it's just going to invite frog and toad and everybody to move into the little pools that form in there, and any organic debris or any of this stuff, if it makes it as far as going into there. Without sunlight, it won't get started growing like that, but there's other kinds of mold and slimes and stuff that can build up, and essentially detritus can sit in there and become a big, whole, solid mass of rotten debris and crud. And then anything flowing along over it as it passes gets slowed down and drops into it, and it just compounds like a plaque on your artery until you've got a serious problem in there. And so you may not see it immediately, but or it could be so bad as we break the line itself open, and then have just all kinds of especially right here if it were to break. And then it would pour all the rainwater off the roof as well as everything outside directly down, directly into the sump crock and be puking it outside. And so with very little, just with consistent rain, you'd be seeing the sump run like crazy and you wouldn't know what the hell is that. So, long story short, we want to be careful of all those things, but I'm going to get into it now and try and make a bunch of headway. It's like 70, breezy, low humidity, and sunny, and the birds are singing. So let's do as much as we can possibly get done today. Alright, so first things first, I just wanted to make sure that this is a nice straight downhill all the way over and out. So you see me stick the piece in, get a sense of the elevation here with the laser, and it's rocking over the second half of the trench, starting here, going the rest of the way. And so I could hand dig the rest, but that is more root underneath where we took that big root out. And so I thought, well, I gotta come and just excavate here and there, start with, and get down to either side of it through the hard packed earth, and real quick, and then we'll get that cut out of there, and we'll just keep going with the excavator, even with the backhoe, and skim a little bit more out of there, probably take that root ball out and whatever. So I just was going to come right back with the excavator skid steer. I'm getting ahead of myself with this machine. It's not an excavator. With the skid steer with the backhoe on it, and the key twisted off. I was lucky to get the second half out of the ignition, but I reach in and up and start the machine from sitting into the seat. I've done it for years. So I can't believe I turned it the wrong way and just kept going. Regardless, I don't know what the hell, because I don't have another key. So I got both pieces. I'm going to see if the lock master, back where I literally just drove through when I picked up the pipe and the hooks at Lowe's, I'm going to call ahead and see if he can do anything for me today, because it's like, here I am stuck without this again. So we could cut in verts and stuff, but essentially he should have this first, or I'll ask him on the phone, is it worth bringing out and leaving with you for the day or whatever, while I can come back and cut in verts after lunch? No. And then leave the thing I was about to do to the very end, do it when this is running, and then go ahead and backfill everything because we're ready for it. But I kind of wanted to finish gluing up the ground line. I kind of just like to, dust my hands off after a task is complete and move on to the next. Where in my mind, leaving that unglued and unfinished over to there with fall is irritating to have to go to cutting inverts. But I'll live. But again, I don't want to then reach out about this and find out it's going to take, if there's anything he could do about it, it's going to take time that it could have been waiting. So, okay, let's see what happens. Okay, so if you notice, I was careful to put the clean out Ys, justify the bottom edge of them to the top of the waterproof membrane, which is just a couple inches below the threshold to all the windows, thereby ensuring that somewhere along in here we are, at the very least, not sticking out way above ground with it and showing the SDR35 that goes up to it. I actually don't even mind the grade coming up, because it'll have a plug and stuff in it, grade coming up to obscure it, because you almost no chance of needing it, number one, and number two, it won't be in every place here. If we choose to cover a couple of them, there'll be a few that are exposed, indicating that, of course, there are at least that many, and maybe there are even some others, you know, underground at some other points where we have problems. But like I say, I don't want them all over the place in terms of elevation, yada yada yada, and I want the rest of the way up to be in white. So what I need to do here, though, is I don't have any waterproof membrane, so I need to get the edge. I need to go and measure the top of the waterproof black membrane from the siding and put that number here, and then I can use it to set the two cleanouts for these two downspouts. But I've come to the end of my glue, so we're gonna have to run out and get some. And skid steer, she started up no problem. First key out of the 4 that I had the guy make, my buddy Jeff. So we call him Sexual Jeff, don't ask me why. It's really couldn't be further from the truth, really. So okay, back to get some glue, and then back to work. All right, this does not get an adapter on it. All of these vertical Ys get another white leg. Notice the green below them. It should be white the rest of the way, which, you know, the grade will at least be here, if not just a bit up in some places, which is no problem, because like I say, the cleanup may never be necessary. That's the goal. So the rest of them, I just set the adapter on for right now. And so over there we'll use a cap on top of that leg, but until we glue in the white leg onto it, you know, there's something to be said for doing that, because essentially we're filling up to the bottom end of the Y. So, and I'm not pouring straight down onto anything, and so because it's just me, I'm not going to go any further. Worst case scenario, if we get dirt down there and it's a real problem for me and I really feel it's necessary to clean it out, I can poke this shop vac hose down in there and suck the dirt out. If I don't feel it will wash out over time. And so we can jump into backfill. No, we got to put hooks up. Let's do that. I got a pile of the heavy duty hooks. Ooh, and we got to plug in some backup battery. But I'm going to go along and dispense them. So each leg of this has got a one hook in about 1 foot from either end. And so then whether I think we need 1, 2, or 3 more, like in the case of here probably 3, I'll throw them there all around, and so that I'm not installing and coming up short or whatever, or I have an idea of what's coming ahead of me. And then once they're laying there, I'll get set up with the hammer drill, the impact driver, and some screws, and I'll run along and just zip them all in, and then we can backfill. And so I'll also work from one end to the other, doing both, so that there's some method to my madness. And then we'll get that in here. All right. Okay. Have a little sip of my tea, aka finish it off. Practice restraint, Jazzy. Leave yourself another swig along with your apple for in a moment. So roughly every 2 to 3 feet, we've got a hook, and there's quite a few there because I want to be sure of that. I'm not just going to fluffily put in fluffily. I'm not going to slough off and fluff and then just drive through there with reckless abandon and smash that all down and off. Or we'll have, hopefully, if it were to happen, it would drive this down, which has got a positive stop on the ground practically already. We got to get a battery. No thanks. And so right along here, same thing. And we're just putting in one screw because if we're not shearing that screw off and keeping the plastic together, if anything's breaking, it's the plastic. So we won't overdo the screwage. It's mostly just as an investment. And see, that one there is a bit cracola. But we'll carefully backfill. They were $1.50 or something a piece. So if we've got another 30 bucks in this thing, then we thought we might want, so be it. Like I said, right along under the window there. Obviously didn't want to hang one and have it, anywhere there getting seen. I suppose I could have broken it, but I'm fine with that. I wanted to keep it from the edges because you're going to end up with a window well unit that theoretically fits that opening, so it shouldn't be so wide so that the flange is in the way. Those are in the way of the flange, but we'll hedge a bet. So now we'll just push. Ooh, we don't want this. Try not to leave things lie everywhere. Try not to just throw things over your shoulder and keep moving. I grouped all that stuff together, especially that steel bar and things like that just disappear, virtually disappear because they have no bright colors or paint or anything. Okay, I'll throw this here. I'll get the transit in here. I'm going to leave that stuff because it's just too much to dick around with. But I'll probably start right here and kick a lot of this dirt off in there. I can't think of anything else that we need to address. I'm not allowed to put the sump crock into this underground. And I think, you got to remember that the air, freezing cold air, certainly not 48 inches below ground level. And so it should never stand full of water or anything close to full of water anyway. And when it's freezing outside, we don't have any flow here. So when a little bit of crossover there, but once it's thawed out enough to flow, it ought to flow underground as well. But if you have got problems under this 48 inches and below in the groundwater level and the sump pump's trying to pump out, and it's pumping out into this much freezing cold air and building up and up and up and up over time, it can get to the point where the ice does obscure the line out and it's underground and you can't sump pump out and whatever. So the sump pump should go out and stay 48 inches underground if you can, over to the very end. And of course, air could flow up it, but to start with, you have a check valve either just inside or just outside of the wall, so we never get any backflow. But I think you could probably put a check valve at the far end of it too, although you'd want to make it, I like the check valve inside in case it needs service or inspection, and then, inside the basement. And I like the idea of the check valve out here at the exposed end. So anyway, you haven't got anybody moving in either, and you haven't got cold air going up it. And so the end treatments here are TBD, but I will end up carefully excavating out at a later time after this backfill, and with the probably thinner bucket, and we'll do a trench for the sump pump, which I'm just not ready to bore through the wall and plumb it out yet. It remains to be seen how I want, because it would be ideal. We're gonna have a framed wall inside. I'd like to have an access panel in that wall to get to anything that you might want to get to, and so it could be clean and smooth behind the crock and stuff isn't mounted on the wall. And so for that to be a place that I know where I want to be, I got to wait till the stud layout's in there, and for that to be there, I got to wait till the floor's in there, and so we're nowhere near that now. So trenching the sump pump for a later time, and that means I can hop in this machine and put dirt back in this hole. Isn't that fucking super exciting? Let's do that. Oh, and I just scalped, like I said, an inch out of this just to get the fall that I wanted. So I've got 2 inches lower here than there, and that's about half the fall. You kind of want 2 inches every 10 feet, but I've got 2 inches almost every 20 here. But it's still good. The more I tunnel into these roots, if those roots aren't part of this little tree here, if it's the roots on the major side of this tree here, it's serious, big, and those were also, which I think is more of that. That might have been just another trunk off the same tree. It's hard to say. But I don't want to just destroy every major root over here, because if we get the right kind of wind, which we don't often get from this way, and just push this tree, in theory, potentially risking right directly onto the neighbor's house. And so I just took what I needed here, and it was less time spent, and I didn't cut right on through everything either. So hopefully it doesn't die, which is a step in the wrong direction also. Between being dead and having no roots in about 5 to 10, and the right kind of wind and ice storm and wind in the right direction, and you get something like that, which would be catastrophic and terrible. I'd hate to ever think that I'd be responsible. So this way I won't be. Okay, backfilling. Well, there's some kind of monstrous enormitude coming through. I don't know what in the hell that would be and where it would be going, because with some kind of gas bottle on the side of it. Well, looks like they're holding up traffic for a while, but I guess not too long. Well, there you go. Alright, Woodruff just ripped out of here again. Left me a load of wash number 2 stone with the 10-ton truck. He snuck out back. Obviously had to be careful of this hole that used to be here. See, this is a testament to the difference between what feels to the human foot like being compacted well enough and what is, you know, dispensed and crunched in by Mother Earth and the, what do you call it, glacial effect. This is why we can't get started making things on top of even plate compacted only if it's got a point load. It's a relatively small footprint for, I don't know, 3 or 4 tons anyway. Well, 2 tons, 3 tons, depending on how much. Well, yeah, it's 10,000 pound. So yeah, the truck 2 and 1/4 of it or whatever in the rear corner. Tons and tons of weight on a couple square feet is still a problem. And so 2 things: foundation needs to be constructed on virgin earth in a lot of cases, or it needs to be big enough in terms of surface area versus the load, that ratio, not to squish in and basically sink down. So that's just a cool way to visualize that. Anyway, he got all the way back here and got my number 2 stone to here, which is great. So then I haven't got to go all the way back and forth all the way around the house now to put it in. So we'll get some in right here. I just want to come up underneath the pipe, let it slough over in, and we'll try to drive over here around and dump some off here. I'll try and side load the bucket, so on the right hand side as I come in here and try to get most of it down in there. I just want to bring the level up. Let's see, I hadn't been thinking. I was thinking I could build up as I drive forward and ultimately reach all the way in there, but really I'm building up the stone to the underside of the pipe just as a way to measure roughly its thickness above the footer itself. The stone and this underground downspout pipe have no other real relationship, but in this area where it's not several more feet down because we have a shallow footing, we do want the footing at 48 inches under the surface of the earth so that we get back to having the protection from it never freezing. It being lower out here, it could be driving away at it from an angle too, in terms of the delta T, and then losing heat and ultimately freezing if there's moisture in there. But we're carrying that moisture away with this downspout system. Anyway, the problem is if I'm half filling up with stone and trying to drive on that, and that side is washing out, there's no way I'll have the siding smashed. I'll be stuck in there. It'll be even more difficult to get my ass dragged out of here. So I'm going to have to do stone and then bank run onto it and plate compact, and then stone and then bank run onto it and then plate compact, which means I need a bank run pile and I need a plate compactor, both of which I don't have. So I can't drill my way on over in there. Oh, and on top of the stone, but before the bank run, they want to see landscape cloth. So we're going to need another set of hands, and that's going to be a bit of a precision operation to try and do all those things with the help of the machine. And I really don't want to cart all that material in, yada yada, by hand. That's just for what it would take to do in terms of time and effort if it were anywhere else. I just can't make my peace with doing all that by hand just because I can't get right up to it with the machine. I'll find a way. Where there's a will, there is a way. In here, kind of squidgying, making this hard right as possible, but then the left, not really, without risking the neighbor's fence. So maybe eventually here. No, not really. Because the angle, and that's the thing too, we get all done is like, I'll have to stone to the bottom of the pipe, bank run up to sort of level with what we've got there to drive in and out and kind of plate compact that. But then I'll have to start side loading the bucket and drive to the middle and dump it out, backing my way out one way or the other from both ends here to where we have a bunch of material kind of up at the bottom of the clean out, angling down to here. I really don't want to add anything from here over. The existing shrubs and all that stuff, I want that to stay as an indication of its unchanging the way in which the fence that belongs to the neighbor interacts with our grade over here. And ultimately plate compact that in, so if you got the compactor on that and the compactor's handle and you got to have room to walk, we can't have the dirt coming anywhere near, if we can help it, the neighbor's fence. So it's kind of a complicated operation that we need to have happen there. Meanwhile, he's coming back with 20 tons of 1-inch filtered bank run for me, so that the top stops looking like it has problem areas like this. These are things that you can't hand rake, or that you have to hand rake because you don't want to seed your lawn with stuff like that. I'm looking for something that looks more, along these lines, so that we're raking around and we're raking this, well, we are going to put topsoil probably, but still, I don't want any hand raking, having to comb over the whole surface and drag a couple tons of oversized rocks off. That's not how I want my rocks to come off. So I want to get my rocks off. I don't even want to have to try. Anyway, I want to just cover the last thickness with a better filter material, so that it just saves our handwork at the top. And it's, this wash stone's the most expensive thing on the site because of being washed. But other than that, the less processing you do on something, the cheaper it is. So that the bank run first, the 2-inch filtered bank run after that, the 1-inch filtered bank run on top, and it's a really nice and easy grading material that packs tightly. And then we'll do a little topsoil, and you really don't have to get out there and do a lot of difficult hand raking. But first, this whole situation. Let's start out back where it's going to be real easy. Well, that went pretty well as far as effort. I was thinking I could drive right in here, but it's just not possible to enter at an angle and to extrapolate that up to this narrow alley. I mean, I technically fit in here if I drive straight in and back, but as soon as it's washing out or tipping me, I could damage the fence that belongs to somebody else. I could damage the house. So I can fit in there, and there may be a time that I can zoom all the way around, but first we got to pack it up better. And so now we're going to do landscaping cloth and call in that for inspection, and then take a lunch and pick up the checkbook so we can pay the piper when we got the stone this morning, but we're going to get bank run this afternoon, and then they'll want their check for all of that. But then after the inspection and the bank run arrives, I can get it all topped up in here and over here, and I'm going to get a window well, I think, if I can get one right now, as well while I'm out. And we'll stick that much on here so then we can go up to the waterproof layer, and that's all going to settle down, you'll see, when we get some stormwater here. And so I want to start roughly where I want to be eventually and see that it does sit down some, because it's that much more material that has been packed and compacted, rather than leaving off for now and like walking away from this. I want to take the skid steer home and stuff, and if that remains low and settles from there, then there's a couple feet that need to be added and resettled on top just to get caught up. So this here week the game is called sort of get as much as you can where you want it to be for the rest of the year and get it head started, on settling down. I'll probably drive through here a couple more times with the skid steer. I thought about asking him when he left to drive through here and get this, but I just don't, it's one thing to carefully do so and keep quite away from the chimney, but to get into a getting stuck situation and you need to be pulled out or whatever else, not only is that costly, but the more I'm playing around here, the closer we come with the taller truck to brushing the chimney or whatever else. So I did consider having him pack that up some more, but I'll put some bank run in there and do that myself and just keep adding until it stays. And that's going to be a syndrome on this, trench when we're done with it. We'll backfill it and drag across the top, and then it'll settle at least a foot, since massively, about 10% or whatever. And if I'm almost 10 feet at the road, it'll be a foot deep if I don't heap it up, which I might do to start with, the way you do a grave, which is why that's the way a fresh grave looks in a professional setting. It's heaped up so that it ultimately settles down. Okay, that's that. Let's try and do all of it and come back and kind of finish up with that step today. I got the rest of the workshop coming inside. I set up the time lapse out back, and we got through a ton of gutting out the shop and bringing it upstairs in the house. And so I've got to get set up with tables. I'll get the tables cleared in the basement, bring the tables up, and then bring that table shit upstairs and get it set up. Meanwhile, I'm going to try and consolidate together what we're not going to be needing anymore. The digging stuff and the lifting shores are all laying in the garage. It's going to be increasingly difficult to keep what we need and keep the garage and basement empty enough to get through the foam and the hog wire and the PEX layouts, and to truly not be in underneath any covering or out of the weather unless we're all the way up in the house. So like the shores and stuff, I want to finish up with them. I want to use them maybe with that temporary beam just to snug up the sister joists in the other part of the house as they get nailed up. And so even taking them out of the basement was kind of bugging me out right now, because if we get too far ahead and pack it all up down there, I'm not going to want to go down there and make pressure marks all over everything. But then if we kept them and waited till after the floor was poured, I'd be tripping through them all until then. And so we kind of got to go down and do that much and nail up the sister joists all before we get serious about packing up the stone in the floor. Also, that we're not doing rework or fixing things that we messed up and don't do in the right order. So I'm on the case with all of that constantly, so that's in the mix as well. All right, 20 tons of 1-inch filter bank run. This is what you're going to want to do that last 6 inches to a foot of grading. I mean, you could treat yourself and do that, do everything with that. It'll work just the same. I've hedged, that's also, what else? You could treat yourself if you haven't done a lot of site work before, because if you're not careful, you'll be exposing stuff that you intended to bury, because the way that you conceptualize flatness and layers and stuff just can it just takes a lot of experience, and I'm not even that good at it still. So if you don't want to accidentally have handwork to do, like in a place, see this here, I got this kicked over into a place where I can't really get to it until we have either backfilled that or have moved the pot or whatever, so it gets left here. And then you're going to want a place to put it underneath, and so because it's too big sizes, so hopefully we get that tucked in out back at the lowest area next to the egress window before we come to do any, you know, and don't put it off, otherwise we'll end up having to go somewhere with that, or, you know, whether that becomes a problem or not, it's just sort of an example. So we're going to just jump right into the 1-inch filter right at the back here, and we won't risk anything. Over here it'll be quite deep, over here it'll be quite shallow because we don't want to ramp up onto the tree at all, and it's going to be what we put in here, so that if I'm lumping it and hilling it up and around and developing just exactly what to do, I'm not churning and kicking larger stuff up and out of it. We'll put 100% small, fine, easily graded stuff in there, because again, I can't get in there with the machine, and so if I'm in there with hand tools, I do not want to cart dumbass little rocks out of there, and nobody wants me to pay me the time to do that. So it's just be smart. It's a little costly. The delivery is the same, the weight is the same as something else, so we're just being smart about picking our material. I'll put some in there too and drive on it. So let's get you buckled in. It's coming from out front, but I guess we'll watch me fill out back. All right, we better go snag that window well. I wanted to get it while I was out, but I also needed to get back and pay for the gravel and meet with one of the concrete. That's fine. We don't have any in there, I don't think. But that was my concern over working into this area. Gotta get to the point where I can swing through and blend out of here. But anyway, I had one of the guys looking at doing the flat work or the floor in the basement and the garage to get with. But I can run out and get that window well now. I can't think of anything else. We got the verticals. We've got the adapters. I'm not ready to do anything with the downspout yet. Just trying to finish up with the machine. I got feelers out about getting a truck so I can haul it home. I don't know if I mentioned or not, but I don't think I can load all of that in the skid steer. Well, that's another, so maybe it's worth 2 trips. Load up all the concrete or half the concrete and the skid steer and the backhoe onto an equipment trailer, go home, take the backhoe off and set it there, and bring the forks home and put the forks on and pick the concrete off, and then put the skid steer back on the said trailer, come back, unload the skid steer, load up the second half of the concrete blocks and the fire pit, put the skid steer back on the trailer, go home and unload everything at home again, all on my own dime. You know, because I'm making those disappear and they belong to me now, so it's not an insignificant cost. I want to get a dump trailer to get this stuff out of here, and then this concrete, I don't want to take it home because I don't have a use for that, and I would like to throw it out, but when you get to that place, you got to make it so the payloader can either slide it off on the ground, or you can dump up the trailer and just get it out of the dump trailer without dumping stuff like this. And I can't dump this first because then that falls out at the dump, and the dump doesn't want concrete because it'll break their shipping containers that they're loading, and so the concrete reclamation place kind of needs you to just bring them the pieces and be able to get them off on the ground when you get there. Oh, and the brass and copper has to go back to metal place, which is different and hardly worth the trip to just take that much, so I have some at home that I'll throw in. So we got a bunch of little variables, but I can't think of anything else to get at the store. As soon as we button up outside, we're going to look at plate compacting that stone, foam and hog wire that I'm not going to go and get. So I guess I'll just go grab one window well, come back and put it on and finish backfilling. All right, I'm pretty content with that for now. And then we're looking for this area. I think I'd like to maintain the elevation at least from the back of the house over, if not a bit further toward us, but then immediately scallop down to what used to be here, if you can see that this has all been added. So I basically want to come in here with the backhoe and fluff this all up and make it soft over to here-ish, and drag it over and fill up sort of here, and so then we've got just the trail out and back to the egress window. And I'm going to stay away when I fill it. I'm going to drag it, fluff it up, and pull it over. This way, probably dig like this, backing up and putting it here, and then turn around and put the bucket back on again, and fill up like this, and then top this area off with bank run, and it'll allow me to get around the corner here, which I'm having trouble doing because this runs right downhill. So if I get this planed up, although I don't want that stuff at the top out here if I can help it, so I'll keep it down to here, shove it over to there, pack it all up with the bucket, and then top off with the bank run around the corner here, and blend out over onto it with the bank run, because while I'm putting the washed stone and then the bank run on top in the excavation, I'm also pulling the last foot to 6 inches or so out and around and feathering it all the way away. And I've pulled this stone into this low-lying area here that's always soft, and I put some clay over here, and we're just, well, it makes sense with the operations that we're doing, starting to contribute to the final grading around here, even if I'm just basing it out and letting that pack up and then coming back later to add more. So again, with all the different stages of it on my mind, the next stage is to move sort of what's been turned into a highway here, construction highway, and push that all in to there, backfill and feather it, and then as we stand here we should be able to see more of the stuff over there, and it should plane down over that way. And if you think about it, we're done over there now driving. You know, we needed to get up there, and you know, I've worked my way from the bottom up to the top. We got our drain line in, we got as much material around the corner as I could throw at it from this side. We're going to let it pack up, and now that I don't need that, in fact I slid off the far side of it and got stuck, and so we'll start with what is packed on this side of it and loosen that up more. And the fact of the matter is, once we've removed that stuff, I'll back drag through there and I should be able to drive again, because we're just removing what has been added, and what we're exposing was there all along, so nothing should be too soft if we need to get through there. But that was the type of thing on my mind. Oh, and I threw some material in here, and I've driven on it a couple times, but that's great indication, a good teachable moment there of the difference between what you can do with a plate compactor and what, you know, eons of pressure and water and rainfall and stuff can do. Plus, not to mention, if the glacier was on top when it deposited this stuff, that weighs a shit ton as well. So let's get to that much. I'm just trying to get down to the end of the day here with these tasks, and then pick up tomorrow with finishing up in the basement and getting ready to plate compact and stuff down there. That's a different sort of mindset. I'm trying to finish up with this skid steer, but I don't think I'm going to easily be able to get it off site this weekend, so it might stay. But the point was that we're practically done with it, if not completely done with it. I can drive up here too and just hand spoon out. We got to come up almost a foot at the top, well, 6 inches over here to a foot over there, and then plane it down to trying to leave those plants, like I said, kind of exposed. So There we go. Park those up for now. I'm gonna have to start concerning myself with how to use this up over in these areas lower than my final grade. Over in this area lower than my final grade. I want all of that underneath, and then we'll dress the top with this 1-inch filtered bank run, just because it's such a pleasure to deal with it. For the little bit of handwork that you'll do to scratch around and take the whoops and rolls out of it. We got to add a little more material here. We're not quite high enough and stuff like that, but you get down here and you look, it's hard to see, I guess, but it looks pretty good on camera. Anyway, those little bits, and we have to have it get washed and settle and all that too, but I don't really want to work with this on top. It's a real pain in the butt. I've been wheedling and stopping to remove roots and rocks and all that. Here's a root ball here. Actually, I'll drag him up front. And here's this thing. It's, you know, by and large, it's relatively functional, but all it takes is a couple pieces, and it really, even if you have a second person moving these out of the way, it's not professional to try and be effective with your time in the machine and try and really do a final quality anything with this type of stuff. It just has other things in it, and some of which are actually the house itself as it was coming apart initially, driving in and out, dragging a block here or there, and there's a couple in there. I've driven on them and broken them or whatever. Wow, this guy's a wet, soggy mess. So got a bit of stone on our little walk path to the window. I don't want to build that up too much because we're going to need to excavate a little away at the bottom there so that we can do the egress install. That's going to have to wait until we're done coming and going till we're basically all done with the outside work, including poking the lumber probably through it for all the interior framing and all the sheets of foam for under the concrete and all the sheets of drywall if we get that far, the insulation bats. So I'm going to get too ahead of myself with that thing. Ooh, and we got ourselves a cutting to take home and get started. Okay. Back tomorrow. Okay, I got most of my workshop moved up into the front of the corner of the house. I might have gone over there, but then we couldn't have used the door, so right now I got a work lane here. There was a hot air or a cold air return right there, electrical panels here, so I'll eventually poke that one piece of Romex that I put a plug end on it, and get the chargers and stuff in it, at least by the end of the day, so that things can charge overnight. We're not running a lot of batteries down today. And I leaf blowed out all the dirt and grit. This is a lot of sand in this bank run, and I'm going to get I got an old Berber carpet edge that I can use as like a runner to sort of stay on. I want to get the grit off of it, otherwise off the floor first. Listen, it's already not in great shape, but we'll do what we can. But I don't want the grit underneath the carpet, or then walking on the carpet's just doing the same damage anyway. So I got the leaf blower and got that cleaned out. Got some tile remnant, vacuum cleaner set outside. We got some rain last night, so you can see the difference between a yard made out of bank run with a little topsoil and some grass on it versus, obviously this is torn up some, but a yard with this clay soil at the top, which doesn't change that it's underneath there some. But we engage with the ground around the house by walking on it, and if the first foot down or so is a better medium, then we're that much better off. Ed's got his screed / story stick going for stone level. Our big pile was holding some moisture there, so it's getting spread out. And I mean, we got a lot of humidity and moisture around in the foundation drains, that once we put our vapor barrier and our foam and pour our concrete up against the wall, whether or not we use a expansion joint is yet to be determined at the edge. The guy that I talked to yesterday about doing our flat work said he wouldn't do it, or they haven't been doing it lately, or that he could see doing it if we wanted, so it's up to me. Anyway, I'm going to set you up in here. We got the electrical pulled out the window, so it's up off the floor. This is where I think, like I say, I'll take him up through there to be able to run. Oh, and I could maybe even, that light isn't quite long enough. Maybe it'll go around and up through and be able to plug in. I kind of just want that thing laying upstairs. So the power going upstairs to multiple things, as though there's an outlet on the wall, and then the one thing downstairs, or the two, are, you know, the lights and this big fan until he's in our way. We're also going to set up, I got one more stick from home that's real old that I'll cut up to get the last of the cribbing up. We'll use a couple layers of LVL on top. We'll put our fatty shore on it, and we're going to pick up these last 3 posts. and then we'll get that shit out of here. I want to set up that beam on the lighter duty shores again and snug this up, unless, you know, it's a question of whether we think I'm looking at these sister joists, and they're already, if anything, a little bit higher than, because they're a little thinner than. Now over here, I don't know if that's an optical illusion, but I kind of just snug them up there before we nail them on, so that that shear strength of the nail is holding them up against the belly that they may have previously had. So I want to be able to do that down here too. But then all the shores can go home and stuff like that, and cribbing blocks can be disseminated. So, you know, we've got problems like in the garage. We can't have all that stuff in there if we're trying to do concrete prep in there also. So we got to really pare down what we're keeping down here, around here. I'm also going to be too high to set up on the new floor with this 8-foot ladder. We'll want the 5, and we'll want the, where did it go? Around the corner? Yeah, we'll want the 6 feet ladders in here for all the work we do on top of the concrete. Maybe the 8-foot ladder could go, stuff like that. So, and then once we're done with stone goofing around, we'll get all the digging and yard tools out, you know. Logical shit. And so that's what we're doing. All right, see if we find you a good angle for this. All right, we are starting to understand that the workshop is upstairs in the house. I need the little motion detect. I got the power up to this guy, so I have a couple of available outlets basically right there. I got to tell Ed that. And I got some carpet in here because we are bringing in a lot of dirt. Actually, shout out to Jim and Nora. My buddy Jim was moving out of his place. I forget what happened with this. Maybe it was like an extra layer runner because of the white carpet, and it was in a high traffic area at his other house that he sold or something, maybe. I don't know. But he said, "Do you want it?" I said, "Sure, I'll use a piece of carpet." Look at, we're using it. So, and they watch the videos sometimes, I think. So, anyway, then we got their own carpet here. I could get more like a little boot brush that could be secured to the steps. I was thinking about that because the amount of grit that comes in is pretty crazy. I guess I'll probably kick the wires and stuff back in before I leave. That wooden ladder shouldn't sit there. My skid steer keys are in my pocket, so it's shut down, and I'll put those. The workshop's not in the basement, Chazzy. The workshop's where we're just at. I poured some stone here, so we've got, you know, a nice place to walk, except for there's some big blobs of the clay keeps falling down. Oh yeah, you saw me engineer that real quick. I'm going to end up with stone and bank run, so that's what we heaped here, and the clay will be out there. A little bit of stone here will be lost, but I tried to build here out of things that can just be kind of smoothed and smushed in and have the right stuff in the right place when we're done. Then we just drop that tube in. I got half a dozen of those tubes for $100. Actually, I got more than that. I got like a bunch of smaller than that diameter, but still large diameter corrugated tile sticks and stuff like that. So I did real well with those, and the other 5 of them have been laying in my yard for years, and my lovely Katie Merrill can't stand them anymore. Can't stand looking at them. Well, the one has been very valuable on this site, and anyway, I didn't mind taking the side of it out to make like a trough that I could pour in. If anything, I could have gone higher with it, and it would have come down here on its own accord. But then, I don't know, I guess you're looking to be able to see the person with the wheelbarrow to flag you to stop pouring it, whereas I could pour a bunch in and get out and carefully kind of dispense it by just shoving it with the shovel. So that worked, you know, no problem. You see me lay out here where I could see that it was low based on the edges of the footer, and just using that long stick or some. It doesn't have to be that heavy even. You just want something that's not going to dip half of an inch or more over the stretch that you're asking it to bend. Or it's not helping you. So the edgeways thing is a nice thing to try and remember. So it's maintaining a pretty straight line. And so using that, I was able to establish that we needed, you know, stone kind of at the outside all the way around, and mark that in the paint. And then it's nice the other stuff came in wet, so you could see that you'd put it, you know, Ed was careful to dispense it, and we raked it out to where it was basically solid, and then 50%, out to 50% to know that we were sort of getting a feather edge. And he was zooming around in here with that compaction. This is just humidity out of the stone pile that was here, I think I mentioned already. And so I'm wondering now, these pilasters they wanted, because you can't just set the steel on the edge of the wall lest it fall out of there. But again, there was a miscommunication over what my beam ended up being or was going to be or whatever, and I had to, you know, I wanted to move it over from where it had been, you know, planned, because I wanted this to miss, you know, entirely. Whereas if it would have been over there, I suppose I probably could have wheedled that all in there, but it just didn't know. And so at the time, that's what we came this way with the beam. So we shortened these spans a little bit, which is in a good direction here too, because the house was struggling in that aspect. So all things considered, do we need that much of a pilaster? Maybe, but over here, could we really benefit from losing a bunch of it? You know, could we cut it back? Could I run the wet saw down it from both sides and just basically pop it off, tip it over, and cut it into probably 4 pieces and muscle them up and out of here? That could be worth it, see, because if you look at the stone area here, by the time you put a 1/2 inch of foam against the wall and a 2x4 wall and then a 1/2 inch of something on the face of it, you've practically crunched the space down to what's here for stone, almost completely. This may be a little bit thicker here, so maybe it's a little bit bigger over to there. And don't forget, it's not square because of that fuckery that I encountered at the top. And so it would really be a best practice to square it out in the footprint and then plumb the wall pieces up so that if there's a little bit of area or space behind them, who cares? Because in the end, the space in here is nice and square and plumb and level. Because you start doing things like shelves and you find out that they're all janked the fuck in here, and it's, you know, you don't want that. So you would take the opportunity to fix it. So thereby, this gets really small. So cutting a bunch of this back, because if you have a finished wall coming through here and coming through here, you get down to, you know, then you need to return that, because this is a wall coming through. It makes a very short hallway almost, because this is so thick and we're out here. And so like it's a good indication of what the wall's doing to see the footer. And so then if you're going to put a door out here that's planar, you need to stub this out enough to carry the jamb, and then it ends up swinging in, and it's like the tiniest little thing. It's not going to work. So I'm really considering cutting some of this back. I got to talk to the architect about doing that if I can and whereabouts, but I want to do that then before we got concrete in here, because I'll run the hose, and so it'll be making a water mess, but of course that can lay and fall down right through this stone, right into that foundation drain, and right off into our crock. And so hopefully I won't run 30 gallons of water down into the crock while I am running that saw. But anyway, you know, we won't be getting it all over the floor, and some of that reactivated slush with the water on the fresh concrete floor could be problematic. So that's a decision to make before we go getting ready to call it. Oh, and before we put any foam on the floor, we want to do that, or any hog wire, or any of that, because that's kind of what's next here. As well as setting up and doing this last little bit of lifting, where I'd really like to spread the load out of that orange foot. I got bigger steel plate, and I'd like to put another piece in here that I wasn't aware that we had until I turned around and looked. So I'm gonna leave that for now until next week. But we just got to go up a little. I'm gonna scoot the post, because the posts are where they are in the drawing exactly in the real life. But I have the flexibility to scoot back, and it's kind of better to be on that pier. We'll go to the middle of that pier. This guy's going to move over right to kind of the butt crack area of this. This one, I can't go more toward the center, because that aspect I could slide up and down some, but I can't move over because he's got to be buckled up there. I check everybody for absolute, dogged, perfect, exacting plumb, because when you pour up your floor, you lock them in forever. And I kind of just want these things to be done, because it's been a long time coming, just being 100% totally committed. And at that point, we can drill them and bolt them up, which is what we're going to need for inspection to pass and close out our building inspection. But that's kind of the stuff that's all on my mind. Carefully pressing on the stone with that beam to shoot up those sister joists so that floor tightens up. And, you know, that's where we're going to be getting the skid steer off the site first thing probably next week, and the concrete probably taken home as well, and then jumping into going to get that foam and getting it here, because it could be stacked up in here and staged while we're doing that last little bit. I'm going to tag the trailer rental, make it long, or see if I can do it within the one I've got already, or add another day onto it, or half a day, and get that foam. We're going to get that second hand, so I'll keep you posted on whether we get a good deal on it versus the driving to get it or whatever else. And then we're going to get the hog wire around the corner at Tri County where we normally get stuff. He's got a good price on that, and try to get that here with the trailer. And then it'll be kind of like a clean room. We'll be putting down foam and hog wire and staying off of that with our dirty feet, and then looking at maybe rolling out some PEX. So like I said, I can kick this inside, getting ready. And if Ed and his agents and helpers and the fine young gentleman that's his grandson are working down there, and I've got them set up and being productive, then I, if it's weather permitting, will probably open up this front wall and get that torn out. We'll make a decision on the door size here and get the front wall rebuilt tight to the subfloor, get the subfloor buttoned down and our sole plates in the sides, and reconstruct it all back up and ready for a pre-hung door installation. And keep our eyes out for, you know, whether it makes sense doing. I mean, the thing is, that's an outside task, and so is this trenching. And so I kind of want to do that. And the trenching thing is like, I need my head completely clear. I just want to maximize our rental costs. It's not going to be astronomical, but it's just like, once you start trenching that deeply and getting into all the different facets of doing this, though it seems so simple, all of a sudden, if you've got to walk away and leave that machine sit for the better part of a day or a day, and you got to pay for it, otherwise it's going to disappear and you're not going to know when you're going to get it back, all of a sudden you get yourself in a real bad way. So I want to be in and out, and I don't want anything else on my mind when I come to do that. We got some space tied up in this place. But the tests I mentioned before that allow me to get the shores out of here and take them home again. That finishes up the wet saw. Most likely lets me take him home again. You know, the lumber can move around with the forks and be set outside. It can do a couple days out in the weather and then come back in. It's not the end of the world. And, you know, digging and hand tools at that point too likely could all just be set aside, maybe even into the pod. And so we get down to just, you know, the mortar for afterward and some of these equipment things for afterward. We got a bunch of rain, which has been good. I wish you could get those plastic dongles and, you know, get the downspout into the drains, because I did run the garden hose and see that the water came out on those already. But then you're buying 1, 2, 3, 4 at least of those for $29.95 or whatever, and another $100 spent on things you won't be using forever. So it's rinsed this out a little bit here from pouring out on the ground, but it's not the end of the world there. So I guess, yeah, I'll throw this thing in so the lights turn off automatic, and I'm out of here for this weekend. That's another good one this week. Got a little more. This will probably top us up across the back when we choose to get in and around that egress window. And we'll certainly need some more here. And what I'd like to do is kind of like to put a load on the task of just getting the front yard to look, you know, good and graded out when we're practically done, and a load in the back. So we got 2 more full 20 or 22 ton loads of 1-inch filter bank run in our future down the road to get, you know, I don't want to build a lawn on this. It's just not. We want to do it on something that looks like it does in the immediate backyard in the back. We got a tree that's got to come down there, so we got some fringe stuff, and obviously clean the gutter things. So, but I'm feeling good about this, guys. It's been a long time getting to the floor pour inside, and we're not quite there yet, but that is really gonna. I stood on the sump crock, and I'm still about 6 inches shy of touching the floor joist, which will be about where the finished floor is, which is a real nice overhead. And then when we get it to a point we're happy with, we can get the block windows put in too. Talking the next few weeks on all of this. Probably by the middle of August we'll have a floor and windows in the holes, and between then and now I'd like to get that trench kind of done. So then, yeah, mid-August to mid-September we'll be inside the basement, just getting everything all hooked back up again. Get out of here mid-September, hopefully. So, all right, everybody, thanks for watching. We'll see ya.